called Giza in pre-dynastic times was called Rostau. This Sphinx most probably had to have this event as its namesake, because even today Egyptians call the Sphinx Sheshep Ankh Atum. That means the living image of Atum. But remember, we're talking about the center of the galaxy. If you're familiar with that at all, you'll know that that's not very visible in the Milky Way. In fact, that's where everything gets dark, because again, all the interstellar dust created by these many stars that are exploding and doing different things all the time anyway, opaques the light and it doesn't get to you. So something extraordinary, such as the explosions of the core that go on for many years, has to create enough cosmic rays to travel this way to finally create a field of light. This same eye, once the sun seems to travel out of it, but all it simply means is that we're traveling behind the sun at that time, the sun will go back in and out of this eye. And so that makes kind of a house or enclosure for the sun. The temple where the cipher was found, that I will show you, was dedicated to this Eye of Atum Ra, which is a title actually of the goddess that the Greeks called Hathor and the pre-dynastics called Het Heru. Now, I don't think they believed in goddesses or gods. I think that's merely a code, if you will, created as a mythical name for them to really express what they were talking about among themselves. Because Hathor and Het Heru both mean the same thing. They mean to house or to envelop, to even womb the sun. The sun was thought to be reborn at that time. And indeed, it could look like it died and was reborn. Because as these cosmic rays travel outward, they do things to the sun. Even now, before we see these rays, it's been a long time since they've been traveling out, and they're still present in our solar system. There's a Soviet physicist by the name of geophysicist by the name of Alexei Dmitriev, and he's been telling people for years that the solar system is getting seriously disturbed magnetically. It's creating a plasma overdraft because of all the energy coming into it. And the only thing different at this time than any other time is that we're traveling through the equator of the galaxy. And 2012 is a year that even he and others are beginning to realize will have serious consequences for all of us. Now, this great Sphinx of Giza was also built to face this event. And if anyone knows anything about the winter solstice, they know that the reason why the alignment takes place on it in December 21 is because that's the horizon, if you will, for the galactic axis corridor to the center of the galaxy. When the sun rises that morning, and once there are enough rays finally, it may be on that actual day or before or after, who knows, calendars all develop flaws after a time, it's going to be over the center of this light that has traveled from the center of the galaxy. The center of the galaxy will be right behind it, right behind the sun. And this is how they knew to create the cipher. And this is what the Sphinx was built to face. The Sphinx was meant to greet or to in some way memorialize what they knew was coming. To build the Sphinx, to greet this thing, they had to know at least 2 galactic alignments ago. Before the last one, and at least the one before that time, 26,000 years ago roughly. Now the Sphinx, after the pole tilt that took place, and I'll talk about that more in a moment, signaled by this eye, Earth's axis of rotation changed, and I'll tell you where I think that was from to where. And the Sphinx went to a GPS reading 5 degrees southeast. Now, the old magnetic pole of Earth was in the Hudson Bay. And from the Sphinx, the angle of difference between the Hudson Bay to the Arctic Pole is 23 degrees. If you push that Hudson Bay pole back up, the Sphinx, already facing 5 degrees southeast, goes down an additional 23 degrees, and all of a sudden it's on the winter solstice line of horizon for the coming galactic alignment. The Sphinx was also probably not sporting the kind of head that we see at this time. Many are beginning to realize that the Sphinx probably looked more like a lioness, because in some way it's really an aspect of Hathor or Het Heru. It's meant to represent the constellation Leo, because the constellation Leo is the equinox we're always in before the galactic solstice takes place in Scorpio. Now, many times Scorpio is represented in the past as a raptor as well, and that's because of all this stuff that comes down and gets us, like an owl at night finding a field mouse. And in Egypt, the lions on the throne were known as Acre lions. They represented Leo because they represented these two equinoxes between which basically rule was possible on Earth. Now, because of this, there's also something else that's very important. The Ankh, which you see on the back of King Tut's throne chair here, is actually a combination of a rod and a ring. This is the ecliptic path of the sun, represented by the rod, and the ring represents the precessional circuit. This is an old symbol which you can find all throughout the ancient Middle East. Now, because of the eye in the middle, it also represents the throne of Atum-Ra. Akhenaten is known as the pharaoh of the Aten, but the Aten was known to many of the rulers at the time. And it simply was a disk that they knew somehow represented, manifested this center god of creation, or god of all, the All-Lord, when the sun wasn't even there, when the sun was traveling out of it. And because that disk is manifest between the wings of the galaxy, and they would be also highlighted a little bit. Remember, this won't be dark behind here. We're talking about daylight. We're talking about seeing the sun against us. You had wings and a disk. This is where the winged disk comes from. Now, Akhenaten